míle maithagibh goléir agus balla íarmh an seo. Ba bhfuil an bhuicas a gháil dosach bara le níomh as ocht an cuire a furas chun leirtlibh an seo inniuh. Cogádagus freisin ar son an slua móra atá an seo agus an simatá gibh san ábhartácht tá phléiguing omrán. When I was asked by Niamh would I come and speak at the conference, she posed two questions to me. She said, would you answer the question, why did you vote against the abortion bill? And also, why did I describe an abortion in detail in my second stage speech? The answer to the first is in fact easy. I believe very much in the philosophy of that great Irish parliamentarian, Edmund Burke. When he talks about public representatives, he talks about them keeping in close communication with their constituents. But he goes on to add a rider to that when he said, the representative, his unbiased opinion, his mature judgment, his enlightened conscience, he ought not to sacrifice to you, to any man, or to any set of men living. Your representative owes you not his industry only, but his judgment. And he betrays instead of serving you if he sacrifices it to your opinion. I must say I embraced that from the first time that I actually read it. I think also that there's an onus on us all to pursue and seek the truth. I think that applies particularly in politics. Sometimes it's not that obvious, but sometimes it's very obvious. And in the case of abortion, we're talking about a very objective truth. And objective truths are easily accessible through the application of our conscience, of our reason, and of our intellect. And anybody who engages in that process cannot come but to one conclusion in relation to abortion. I think also as individuals and as politicians, we must be guided by certain principles. And one of the ones I know that will guide you and guides me and other people is that human life is inviolate. Human life is inviolate from conception to natural death, interrupted anywhere along the continuum, and the rest of that life is obliterated. There's a very fine article in a newsletter of UCC back a number of years ago by Professor William Revel, who hails from my own hometown, New Ross, where he writes a very good paper in relation to that. I suppose the major concern that those of us in politics and people of goodwill and concern for the unborn had in relation to the bill primarily surrounded Section 9 with the area of suicidal intent. The Oireachtas Joint Health Committee held hearings over a number of months where expert medical and legal professionals were asked to give their opinions to inform the committee. I would have to say that while that committee came in for some praise from certain elements, liberal elements in the media, the process was indeed an absolute charade. All of those, particularly on the medical side, said very clearly, we must practice evidence-based medicine. The incontrovertible witness evidence from a number of the speakers was that no textbook or medical journal advocated in any shape or form that abortion would be a treatment for suicidality. But obviously the government had already decided what they were going to do, and the Minister for Health 12 months earlier in a Dáil debate had clearly set out what he intended doing. So this was an exercise, as I said, not only as a charade, but it showed me clearly that the government in these areas are masters of sophistry and spin, unfortunately. Niamh asked me to talk about my speech and why I structured the speech as I did. I actually happened to be away and was expecting that the debate was going to be on the Wednesday in the Shannon. And I was at a board meeting of an NGO that I'm involved in New York, and I had to come back one day earlier. And as I sat down in the airport, in JFK Airport, I was aware that when I came into Dublin, I would probably have to go straight to the chamber and deliver my speech. So I felt that I should sit and put at least some structure down as to how I would approach what I was going to say. I decided that, to me, there were three elements which went to the essence of what this bill was about. And I felt I would address all three and give my opinion and also support that opinion where I could. Firstly, there was the issue of women who have a real medical crisis in their pregnancies. And it's essential that any life-saving interventions or treatment is given to those women and they're not in any way deprived of efforts to save their lives. Sometimes, unfortunately, that leads to the loss of the baby. But secondly, I noticed that women who have had abortions and who feel left down and abandoned as a consequence and subsequent to the abortion, that their particular situation hadn't in fact emerged to any great extent in the debate in the lower house. And I'd come across a booklet written by Dr. Praveen Tavasasan, who talked about post-abortion trauma and described it as the psychological consequence of repressed grief following abortions. We also had evidence. We had established an Oireachtas Human Dignity Group, and indeed all the pro-life groups were with us at certain stages, and we had experts in various fields, particularly in the medical sphere, to come and talk to us. One such group was Women Hurt. And I know that there are many people here from the Wexford pro-life group, and we had the distinction to listen a short time ago in Wexford to Bernadette Goulding, who actually established and spearheads the campaign of Women Hurt. And she's a powerful advocate for the pro-life movement, giving testimony as to her own personal experience and the trauma she suffered as a consequence of having an abortion as a young woman. Dr. Praveen Tavasasan also outlined certain case studies which I read into the record. And that upset and maybe infuriated, might be a more appropriate word, particular feminists. Just one aspect of this as well, when we're talking about the suicidality issue, Dr. Praveen Tavasasan also stated in his booklet, he said, as a nation, and he's talking about Britain, we were profoundly moved when a young artist killed herself after aborting her twin babies. She wrote of how much she longed to be with them. And many of you will be familiar with that case. And as I moved on to the third issue, I was taken from the first time that I read the legislation with the definitions. As I read through the bill, you could read from beginning to end, and the bill, you'd be quite sanguine about the wording in the bill. But in the definitions there was medical procedure, which they stated included medical intervention or surgical intervention. So it included that. Didn't say what was excluded, which to my reading meant if things weren't excluded, well then they were allowed. So I decided that that needed to be spoken about. And the best I could do, because I'm not a medical profession, was to put on the record of the House an address which was made by Dr. Anthony Levatino, who spoke to Congress in recent years, and he spelled out exactly what a second trimester abortion was. He had performed 1,200 abortions, and after his daughter was killed in an automobile accident, he decided that he would assume completely the pro-life side and the pro-life argument. Having set it out in detail, I decided that it should be used to, and the reason and purpose I did it was to expose the deceit that was going on from the government side, and also to challenge members who were compliant in following what I call the tyranny of the whip. I must say the media reaction was predictable. I was obviously excoriated in the national papers, criticised by colleagues, including the Taoiseach, the leader of Fianna Fáil, for the language. One paper was described as formaldehyde language. What I said was horrible and disgusting. I wrote an opinion piece which was published in that newspaper, the Irish Times, and I agreed that what I had said and described was horrible and disgusting. But I posed the question, what does that say about the procedure itself? And of course there was no answer to that. Despite the efforts of the pro-life movement and many others, it was disappointing that so few decided to oppose the legislation. And I've asked myself, why is that? Is the government, have politicians come to the stage where there are no principles applying, there are no values, no commitment to the common good in society, and that really all we're there for is to have an unseemly and unholy objective of being re-elected, holding on to power and ministerial positions at all cost? Good people were coerced into abrogating their conscience. I felt sorry for so many of them, so many members who succumbed to bullying. But I applaud those who did not, including Deputy Terence Flanagan, who was here amongst us. It reminds me of a quotation from Archbishop Fulton Sheen, that great teacher and evangelist, when he said, "If we do not live as we think, we soon begin to think as we live. We suit our philosophy to our actions." And I see my cue card to stop, which has been up for a little while, so apologies. But I just want to conclude by saying, if we who have a pro-life conviction fail to strongly articulate our position in defence of the most weak and vulnerable of all human life, then their cause is lost to the shame of humanity. The abortion holocaust is, as was said by a previous speaker, the human rights issue of our day. I know you will never be found wanting in that regard. Barbua agus Bannacht.
So wake me up when it's all over. When I'm wider and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I didn't know I was alone.
One of the other senators who was very heavily involved in opposing the legislation was Senator Fidel Mejia Eames, who unfortunately couldn't be with us here today, but did make a video for us, and so we'll play that now, please.
Gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invite to be with you today. I do apologise for not being present, but just to say, I suppose, I really am I'm grateful for this opportunity to say a few words, and I'm very taken by the theme of your conference today, bringing Ireland back to life, and it's very apt. And we all know why it's very apt. In a way, I suppose this is like a this is your life moment for me, speaking to a camera and knowing that this is going to be broadcast to a large audience. First of all, I want to commend you all for being present. And you'll forgive me if I give a particular welcome to people from Galway and the west of Ireland. I've gotten to know many of you in the course of the recent debates on abortion that we had last summer. I suppose in many respects that whole debate has changed my life, in the sense that prior to that debate I was obviously a member of the Fine Gael Parliamentary Party. And now I'm not. As you know, I've been expelled myself and 6 others for how we voted on the life issue. I have personally no regrets about that, in the sense that, you know, in the course of the months leading up to that, we were very well briefed by many people, including our own hearings here in the Oireachtas. And I suppose really, for me, it made sense to vote pro-life. And even if that meant being thrown out of the party. I'm not saying it was easy in terms of, shall we say, what I've lost, in terms of resources, in terms of supports, etc. But this was one decision that I felt it wasn't about being politically expedient, about just being non-thinking. Like, I was so impressed with the amount of expertise that addressed us. So I just felt that on purely evidential grounds, I did the right thing. But I also felt that principles matter. And I still feel that. And I mean, I think the one thing it made me question is, do principles matter in politics? Some say it's what's practical that matters. But I believe principles have to matter for one main reason, in the sense that principles guide us. And when we look to be elected, or go to the electorate and say, vote for me, or vote for my party, how can they take us on a word unless we make some pledges, unless we make some promises? So principles guide the electorate. And on this occasion, I am very disappointed to say that the leadership of our party, of Fine Gael, reneged on a principle and a promise, a solemn promise it gave to the Irish people, and a mandate that was given to us, where we said, Fine Gael will not legislate for abortion. So that has, I guess, it has shaken me, because I also feel let down in that sense. And I do believe the leadership let down the party. At a fundamental level, I believe in giving life every chance. And by voting against the legislation, I believe I voted to give life every chance. I know that's your mission. I know you work every day to protect life, to defend life, and to support life. I just want to wish your conference well and say to you that being pro-life has given my life meaning in a new way. It made me speak about it out loud. I always knew I was probably that in my heart, but it just challenged me in a new and a different way. You've had courage in that area, perhaps a lot longer than me. But look, at going forward, I know, as I say, let's stand together and, you know, I guess show it matters. Show that life matters by voting pro-life into the future as well, and in the imminent elections. Thank you very much, and the best of luck to you all.